Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my continuation of my book reading of Stephen King's Later. I kept an eye on Terrell on my way home. That was second nature to me by then, but didn't see him, which was great. But I've given up hoping that he was gone for good. He was a bad penny, and he'd turn up. I only hoped I would be ready for him when he did. That night, I got an email from Professor Burkett. I did a little research with interesting results, it said. I thought you also might be interested. There were 3 attachments, all 3 reviews of Regis Thomas's last book. The professor had highlighted the lines he had found interesting, leaving me to draw my own conclusions, which I did. From the Sunday Times book review. Regis Thomas's swan song is the usual farrago of sex and swamp tromping adventure, but the prose is sharper than usual. Here and there, one finds glimmers of actual writing. From The Guardian. Although the long, brooding mystery of Roanoke won't be much of a surprise to readers of the series, Thomas's narrator's voice is livelier than one might expect from the previous volumes, where turgid exposition alternates with fervid and sometimes comical sexual encounters. From the Miami Herald. The dialogue snaps, the pacing is crisp, and for once the lesbian liaisons between Laura Goodhog and Purity Betancourt feels real and touching. Sorry for that word. I have never heard of that word before. Liaisons? Something like that? Anyway, rather than like a Purity joke or a stroke fantasy, it's a great wind-up. I couldn't show those reviews to my mother. They would have raised too many questions, but I was pretty sure she must have seen them herself, and I guess they had made her happy as they made me. Not only has she gotten away with it, she had put a shine on Regis Thomas' sadly tarnished reputation. There were many nights in the week and months following my first encounter with Kenneth Theriot when I went to bed feeling unhappy and afraid. That night wasn't one of them. I'm not sure how many times I saw him the rest of that summer, which should tell you something. If it doesn't, here it is in plain English. I was getting used to him. I never would have believed it on the day when I turned around and saw him standing by the truck of Liz Dutton's car, close enough to touch me. I never would have believed it on the day when the elevator opened and he was in there, telling me my mother had cancer, and grinning like it was the happiest news ever. But familiarity breeds contempt, so they say, and in this case, the saying was true. It no doubt helped that he never did show up in my closet or under my bed, which would have been worse, because when I was little, I was sure that there was a monster waiting to grab a dangling foot or an arm. That summer, I read Dracula. Okay, not the actual book, but a kick-ass graphic novel I bought at Forbidden Planet. And in it, Van Helsing said that the vampire couldn't come unless you invited him. If it was true of vampires, it stood to reason, at least to 13-year-old me it did, that it was true of other supernatural beings, like the one inside of Theriot, keeping him from disappearing after a few days like all the other dead people. I checked Wikipedia to see if Mr. Stoker just made that up, but he didn't. It was in a lot of vampire legends. Now, later, I can see it makes symbolic sense. If you have free will, then you have invite evil in it. If you have free will, then you have to invite evil in. Here's something else. He had mostly stopped crooking that finger at me. For most of that summer, he just stood at a distance, staring. The only time I did see him beckoning was kind of funny, if that is, you can see anything about an undead motherfucker was funny. Mom got us tickets to see the Mets play the Tigers on the last Sunday in August. The Mets lost big, but I didn't care because Mom bagged a pair of awesome seats for one of her publisher friends. Contrary to popular belief, literary agents do have friends. They were on the third base side, just through 2 rows up from the field. It was during the 7th inning stretch, while the Mets were still keeping it close, that I saw Terrell. I looked around for the hot dog man, and when I looked back, my pal, Thumper, was standing near the third base coach box. Same khaki pants, same shirt with blood all down the left side and spattering the suicide note. Head blown open like somebody lit off a cherry bomb in there, grinning, and yes, beckoning. The Tigers' infield was throwing the ball around, and just after I saw Terrell, a chuck from the shortstop to the third baseman went way wild. The crowd whooped and cheered, the usual stuff. Nice throw, Busher. My grandmother can do better than that. But I just sat there with my hands clapped tight. So tight the nails were biting into my palms. The shortstop hadn't seen Terrell. He would have run into the outfield screaming if he had. But he felt him. I know he did. And here's something else. The third base coach went to retrieve the ball, then backed off and let it roll into the dugout. Shagging it would have brought him right next to the thing. Only I could see. Did the guy feel a cold spot? Like in a ghost movie? I don't think so. I think he felt, just for a second or two, that the world was trembling around him, vibrating like a guitar string. I have reasons to think that. Mom said, "Okay, Jimmy? You're not getting sunstroke on me, are you?" "I'm fine," I said, and clenched hands or not. I mostly was. "You see the hot dog man?" She craned around and waved to the nearest vendor, which gave me a chance to give Kenneth Terrell the finger. His grin turned into a snarl that showed all his teeth. Then he walked into the visitors' dugout with the players who weren't on the field, no doubt shuffling around on the bench to give him room, without any idea why they were doing it. I sat back with a smile. I wasn't ready to think that I'd vanquished him, not with a cross or holy water, but with flipping him the bird. But the idea did kind of tiptoe in. People started to leave in the top of the ninth after the Tigers scored 7 and put the game out of reach. Mom asked me if I wanted to stay and watch the Mr. Met dash, and I shook my head. The dash was strictly for little kids. I had done it once, back before that fucker James Mackenzie stole our money in the Ponzi scheme. Even before the day Mona Burkett told me turkeys weren't green. Back when I was a little kid and the world was my oyster. That seems so long ago. You may be asking yourself a question I never asked myself back then. Why me? Why Jimmy Conklin? I have asked myself since, and I don't know. I can only guess. I think it was because I was different, and it's the it inside the shell of Terrell hated me for it, and wanted to hurt me, even destroy me if I could. I think call me crazy if you want. I offended it somehow. And maybe there was something else. I think maybe, just maybe, the ritual of Chud had already begun. I think that once it started fucking with me, I couldn't stop. As I said, just guessing here. Its reasons might have been something else entirely, as unknownly as it was to me, and as monstrous. As I said, this is a horror story. I was still scared of Terild, but I no longer thought that I might chicken out if an opportunity came to put Professor Burkett's ritual into practice. I only need to be ready for Terild to get close, in other words. Not just be across the street or standing near third base at City Field. My chance came on a Saturday in October 1. I was going down to Crover Park to play touch football with a bunch of kids from my school. Mom left me a note that said she'd stayed up late reading Philippa Stevens' latest opus. I was going to sleep in. I was to get my breakfast quietly and no more than a half a cup of coffee. I was to have a good time with my friends and not come home with a concussion or a broken arm. I was to come back by 2 at the very least. She left my lunch money, which I folded carefully into my pocket. There was a PS. Would it be a waste of time to ask you to eat something green, even a scrap of lettuce, on a hamburger? Probably, Mom, probably. I thought as I poured myself a bowl of Cheerios and ate them quietly. When I left the apartment, Terild wasn't on my mind. He spent less and less time there, and I used some of the newly available space to think about other things, mostly girls. I was dwelling on Valeria Gomez in particular as I walked down the hall to the elevator. Did Terild decide to get close that day because he had a kind of window into my head? I knew he was far from my thoughts. Sort of a low-grade telepathy. I don't know that either. I pushed the call button, wondering if Valeria would come to the game. It was quite possible because her brother Pablo played. I was deep in a daydream of how I caught a pass evading all would-be touchers and sped into the end zone with the ball held high. But I still stepped back when the elevator arrived. That had become second nature to me. It was empty. I pushed through the lobby, the elevator went down and the doors opened. There was a short stub of hallway and then a door, locked from the inside, which gave me a little foyer. The door to the outside wasn't locked, so the mailman could come in and put all the mail in the boxes. If Terild had been out there in the foyer, I couldn't have done what I did. But he wasn't in the foyer, he was inside at the end of the hall, grinning away like doing so was going to be outlawed the day after tomorrow. He started to see something, maybe one of his bullshit prophecies. And if I'd been thinking of him instead of Valeria, I probably would have either frozen in place or stumbled back into the elevator car, whamming on the door close button, for all I was worth. But I was being pissed at him for intruding on my fantasy, and I remembered thinking was, and all I remembered thinking was what Professor Burkett told me on the day I brought him the casserole. The tongue biting in the ritual of Chud is only one ceremony before meeting an enemy, he said. There are many. The Maoris do a war cry dance as they face their opponents. Kamikaze pilots toasted each other and the photographs of their targets with what they believed was magical sake. In ancient Egypt, members of the warring houses struck each other on the forehead before getting out the knives and spears and bows. Sumo wrestlers clap each other on the shoulders. All come down to the same thing. I'll meet you in combat, where one of us will be the best of the other. In other words, Jamie, don't bother sticking out your tongue. Just grab your demon and hold on for dear life. Instead of freezing or cringing, I bolted thoughtfully forward with my arms out like I was about to embrace a long absent friend. I screamed, but I think only in my head, because nobody looked out for one on the ground floor apartments to see what was going on. Terriel's grin, the one that always showed that lump of dead blood between his teeth and cheek, disappeared, and I saw an amazing, wonderful thing. He was afraid of me. He cringed back against the door to the foyer, but it opened the other way, and he was pinned. I grabbed him. I can't describe how it went down. I don't think a much more gifted writer than I am could. But I'll do my best. Do the best I can. Remember when I said about the world trembling or vibrating like a guitar string? That was what it was like on the outside of Terriel and all around him. I could feel it shaking my teeth and jittering my eyeballs. Only there was something else on the inside of Terriel. It was something that was using him as a vessel and keeping him from moving on to whatever dead people go when their connection to our world rots away. It was a very bad thing, and it was yelling at me to let go, or to let Terriel go. Maybe there was no difference. It was furious with me and scared, but mostly it was surprised. Being grabbed was the last thing it had expected. It struggled and would have gotten away if Terriel hadn't been pinned against the door. I'm sure of that. I was a skinny kid. Terriel was easily 5 inches taller and would have outweighed me by at least 100 pounds if he'd been alive, but he wasn't. The thing inside him was alive, and I'm pretty sure it had come in when I was forcing Terriel to answer my questions outside the little store. The vibrations got worse. It was coming up through the floor. It was coming down from the ceiling. The overhead light was shaking and throwing liquid shadows. The wall seemed to be crawling first one way and then the other. "Let me go," Terriel said, and even his voice was vibrating. It sounded like when you put wax paper over a comb and blow on it. His arm flew out to either side, then closed in and clapped me on the back. It immediately became hard to breathe. "Let me go, and I'll let you go." "No," I said, and hugged him tighter. This is it. I remember thinking, this is Chud. I'm in mortal combat with a demon right here in the front of the hall in my New York apartment building. "I strangled the breath out of you," I said. "You can't," I said. Hoping I was right about that. I could still breathe, but they were mighty short breaths. I began to think I could see into Terriel. Maybe it was a hallucination brought on by the vibration and the sense that the world was on the verge of exploding, like a delicate wine glass. But I don't think so. It wasn't his guts I was looking at, but a light. It was bright and dark at the same time. It was something from outside the world. It was horrible. How long did we stand here hugging each other? It could have been 5 hours or only 90 seconds. You could say 5 hours was impossible. Someone would have come, but I think, I almost know, that we were outside of time. One thing I can say for sure is that the elevator doors didn't close as they are supposed to 5 seconds or so after the passenger got out. I could see the elevator reflection of Terriel's shoulder, and the door stayed open the whole time. At last I said, "Let me go." At last it said, "Let me go and I'll never come back." That was an extremely tasty idea, but I'm sure you'll understand, and I might have done it if the professor hadn't prepared me for this as well. "I'll try to bargain," he said. "Don't let it." And then he told me what to do, probably thinking that the only thing I had to confront was some neurosis or complex or whatever psychological thing you want me to call it. "Not good enough," I said, and went on hugging. I could see more and more into Terriel and realized he really was a ghost. Probably all dead people are, and I just saw them as solid. The more insubstantial he became, the brighter that dark light, that dead light, shone. I don't have any idea what it was, and I only knew I had caught it. And there an old saying that goes, he who takes a tiger by the tail dare not let go. The thing inside Theriot was worse than any tiger. What you want? Gasping it, there was no breath in him. I surely would have felt it on my cheek and neck if there had been. But he was gasping just the same, in worse shape than I was, maybe. It's not enough for you to stop haunting me. I took a clean, deep breath and said what Professor Briquet had told me to say if I was able to engage my nemesis in the ritual of Chud. And even though the world was shivering around me, even though this thing had me in a deep grip, that grip, it gave me pleasure to see it, great pleasure, warrior's pleasure. Now I'll hunt you. No. Its grip tightened. I was squeezed against Theriot, even though Theriot was now nothing but a supernatural hologram. Yes, Professor Briquet told me to say something else if I got the chance. I later found out it was the amended title of the famous ghost story, which made it very fitting. Oh, I'll whistle, and you'll come to me, my lad. No, it struggled. That vile pulsing light made me feel like puking, but I held on. Yes, I'll hunt you as much as I want, whenever I want, and if you don't agree, I'll hold on to you until you die. I can't die, but you can. That was undoubtedly true, but at the same moment, I had never felt stronger. Plus, all the time Theriot was fading, and he was that dead light to hold in our world. I said nothing, only clenched, and Theriot clenched me. It went on like that. I was getting cold, feet and hands losing sensation, but I held on. I meant to hold on forever if I had to. It was I was terrified and of the thing that was inside Theriot, but it was trapped, and of course, I was also trapped. That was the nature of the ritual. If I let go, it won. At last, it said, I agree to your terms. I loosened my grip, but only a little. Are you lying? Stupid question, you might say, except it wasn't. I can't, sounding slightly petulant. You know that. Say it again. See you agree. I agree to your terms. You know that I can hunt you. You know, but I'm not afraid of you. Bold words. But as I already found out, Theriot could make as many untrue statements as it wanted to. Statements weren't answered to questions. And anybody who has to say they're not afraid is lying. I didn't have to wait until later to learn that. I knew it at 13. Are you afraid of me? I saw that cramped expression on Theriot's face again, as if he was tasting something sour and unpleasant. Which was probably how telling the truth felt to a miserable son of a bitch. Yes, you're not like the others, you see? Yes, what? Yes, I am afraid of you. Sweet. I'll let him go. Get out of here. Whatever you are, and go to wherever you go, just remember, if I call you, you come. He rolled around, giving me one final look at the gaping hole in the left side of his head. He grabbed at the doorknob. His hands went through it, and then go through, and then go through it, both at the same time. I know it's crazy, a paradox, but it happened, and I saw it. The knob turned, and the door opened. At the same time, the overhead light blew out. Glass tingled down from the fixture. There were a dozen or so mailboxes in the foyer, and half of them popped open. Theriot gave me one last hateful look over his bloody shoulder, and then he was gone. leaving the front door open. I saw him go down the steps, not so much running as plunging. A guy speeding past on a bike, probably a messenger, lost his balance, fell over, and sprawled in the streets, cursing. I knew the dead could impact the living. That was no surprise. I'd seen it. But those impacts had always been little things. Professor Bouquet had felt his wife's kiss. Liz had felt Regis Thomas' blow on her face. But the things I'd just seen, the light that blew out, the jittery, vibrating doorknob that had turned, the messenger falling off his bike, were on an entirely different level. The thing I'm calling the deadlight almost lost its host while I was holding on. But when I let go, it did more. It regained Terrelled. It got stronger. That strength must have come from me. But I didn't feel any weaker. Like poor Lucy Westenra, while Count Dracula was using her as his personal lunch wagon. In fact, I felt better than ever, refreshed and invigorated. It was stronger, so what? I owned it. I made it my bitch. For the first time since Liz had picked me up from school that day and taking me hunting for Terrelled, it felt good again, like someone who's had a serious illness and is finally on the mend. And with this, I'm gonna stop it here for this part of the book reading. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.